Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. It's the third Monday of February, which means today is Louis Riel Day in Manitoba. The influential Métis leader was the driving force behind Manitoba becoming Canada's 5th province. To mark the occasion, here's a story on a Métis artist that uses her work to celebrate her heritage.
Well, as far as starting, it's kind of something I can't even say, because I remember painting murals when I was 3 and getting into trouble because they were on people's walls. So it's always been something that's been there.
Tracy Charette-Fair says she has always been an artist, but what started out as a hobby has now turned into a tribute to her heritage. The Métis artist recently featured an exhibit celebrating Métis women at the Winnipeg Art Gallery in 2021. Her exhibit, Heartbeat of a Nation, was a celebration of more than 250 years of Métis women.
And a lot of it I'm focusing in on the women because, in the Métis history and what we know, we hear a lot about the battles, of course, the important, battles of Batoche, the Métis resistance, Louis Riel, Gabriel Dumont, but nobody talks about the women. And they worked side by side, and they were involved in Batoche. But they're the ones that link us through kinship and through our bloodline. And, I really feel that that we have not been given the due that we should have. And that line, connects us to our First Nations history, our grandmother, So to me, it's really important that the women be honored and recognized.
She traced her grandmother's Métis heritage back to 1770. 2020 marked 250 years, so she made 250 clay wood-smoked bowls. The bowls represent, in her words, the domestication of the women who birthed the Métis nation.
I wanted to recognize women, so I'd make 250 bowls representing 250 years and give them to 250 women, basically. What I am hoping for from those women is I want them to give me the name of a Métis woman that they want to recognize. Anyone. It doesn't have to be someone well known. It could be their grandmother or somebody. And then I'm going to take those and turn them into a textile tapestry.
The exhibit also features tapestry from her family's history and pays homage to her aunties.
I always knew that I was Métis. Like we did, but there was such a bad, because there was so much stigma and so much racism, and in the community where my family came from, and I was there too only for the first 6 years of my life, and my mom passed away when I was 6, and so there was this cut from our community and from that part of my family. So this is a reconnection. I reconnected with my aunts quite a long time ago, but hearing their stories and really, it's really given me much more sense of who I am.
Tracy says she will be giving the bowls out between June and August and will start making textile artwork in September. She is also completing her master's degree in fine arts. With all the learning, artwork, and tracing family history, she says she's rediscovered herself.
It's a rediscovery. I think that's what I would call it. It's a rediscovery. It's a resurgence for me of the Métis culture, and not just culture, it's the identity and who are we, and why do I feel compelled to even talk about it? Because for years people told me not to talk about it. They said, you don't look Métis, why would you even talk about it? There was a real, and then realizing this is all part of the colonial system. It's part of this attitude that's been around for so long, is to silence you.
There were a number of activities happening across Manitoba today as well. The St. Boniface Museum in Winnipeg partnered with the Manitoba Métis Federation to put on a Where Do You Stand in Métis Land scavenger hunt, and there is an online documentary about Riel on the museum's website as well. Other activities across the region included hay rides and, of course, dances. David Chartrand is the president of MMF, and he joins me now. David, thank you so much for joining us today. What is your message for people on this Louis Riel Day?
Well, for us as the Métis Nation, it's a proud day. And I think it's to be proud for all Manitobans. Louis Riel and the provincial government was the first Indigenous government to ever negotiate a province into Confederation. That's, I think, historic in its own nature. But recognizing the importance of Riel and overall, our Indigenous culture, we're very family oriented as a people in our culture, but so is many other cultures that have now moved into Canada that live here, and so is the previous, I'll call them residents of Canada, or Manitoba in particular, who have a strong affiliation to making family strong. And that's the culture of the Métis. So I know in other provinces there, they call it Family Day. We call ours Riel Day, but it's synonymous with Family Day because in our culture, it is about family. It's all about family. So from our perspective, it's a proud day, I think, for us, and definitely for Riel. He deserves that this be called after and titled after him. He's the first premier of this province. That's one thing that's unfinished business yet, Daryl, to get him acknowledged. He is now hanging along all premiers in the wall of the Legislative Assembly. It took us, a hell of a long time to negotiate that. But we just want the recognition that he deserves as any other founder and fodder in Confederation in this country.
And you may have just touched on it a little bit, but what is the significance of today?
Well, I think for us, and I think this country, it's trying to create a unification of all society and cultures. And as I said, as others call it Family Day, to try to ignite the ability for families to come together, because everybody's so busy today. And I think it's harder for families to be together, united together. And this pandemic didn't help at all there, because you look at how many funerals we've gone through in 2 years that you couldn't go. Family couldn't go, and you go to a Métis family or First Nation funeral, it's packed, and everybody shows up to the houses, shows up to the halls, to churches, and the people in the hospitals you couldn't visit. So it's totally opposite of everything we believe in. So pandemic has been a very hard time for all of us, and I think this is reigniting the fuel. That it's important that we never forget family. And so for me, it's a really powerful message, and because I'm very strong in the whole concept of family, and as a leader, I've always been, always will be. And for me, just to see Riel's name that we put in our billboards across this province, that people talk about him now not as a traitor, not treasonous or thief, or different ways that they portrayed him, or mentally insane. All those things have gone there. So it's taken 151 years really to try to correct the history of this country on who Lou Riel was, and we're there now, I think.
So what does the MMF have planned?
Well, throughout all our regions, we have 7 regions in the province. You have all types of activities happening right across our province, and it's whether it's going through virtual ways of celebrating. Some are having, actually now there's some relaxation on the COVID rules. Some will start having people in the halls in music events, dancing events, cultural events, activities. They're using I'm not too advanced in the IT world, but there's all kind of new app games they're putting in that you can actually play in Winnipeg with the St. Boniface Museum. But just go to our MMF website, mmf.mb.ca, and you'll see events everywhere in the province. You may want to attend some of them and just participate, take your family out. Let's cross-culture, educate ourselves about each other, whether it's the Filipino community, Chinese community, non-Indigenous community. Just come out there, because they're very closely connected with their family orientation of keeping together. So I think if they want to join a lot of events, they'll be open to all Manitobans, not just Métis.
And I want to get to a recent announcement from the MMF. You guys announced a fur trade venture. How does that go towards supporting a traditional way of life?
Well, thank you for that question, Rob, because if you look at we announced $1 million we set aside already in our budget that will be available to buy fur from our trappers across Manitoba, and it is who we are. We've been trappers. Indigenous people were prominent trappers. In fact, the Eastern world and the European world came to us to seek and sought off our furs. They knew it was the best furs in the world, and they came here. And so they came to purchase it off us. But it's been, Daryl, what scares me as a leader, that I think the percentage, we're a minority now of trappers in Canada as Indigenous, yet we're the majority at one time. So this ignition, as I'll call it, of putting together this $1 million, we're going to pay also there. We're not going to pay, right now the price of fur is virtually with no economic win. There's hardly any money in it. In fact, you're probably losing money. but we're going to pay a higher fee. We're going to pay, if a muskrat's going for $2, for example, muskrat fur, we'll pay maybe $4.50 or $5. If a beaver's going for $12 or $18, we'll pay $35 to $50 because we want to ignite the trappers to make some money, but we also are purchasing there, not right now for sale internationally wide, where our artisans are desperate for fur. They want to start making the muskrat hats, the beaver mitts, the beadwork you see I'm wearing here today. So we're going to look at trying to bring our moose hides into play, our deer hides, our elk hides, which are not being used anymore. So we want to draw that attention to our artisans. They're coming by the hundreds and hundreds, asking for more fur, for leather, for beads, and it's also a micro business there. People will be able to make an income from whether it's trapping, but also make an income in the artisan world. Everything that's made from our citizens, the MMF Edward Samar General Store will purchase. They don't have to worry about how they sell it, where they sell it. If they sit in a mall somewhere on a table, they don't have to. We will buy all their products.
All right, well, that certainly sounds like a great cause, and I want to thank you, David, for taking a few minutes to speak with us today.
Thank you very much, Daryl, and happy Riel Day to everybody. And as I am proud of the founder of Manitoba, I hope you're all proud of him too. So thank you very much.
We want to hear what you think about Louis Riel Day and if you're doing anything. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Families of Indigenous tuberculosis patients sent to Manitoba sanatoriums may soon have a new tool to finding the graves of their lost loved ones. Brittany Guillot reports.
A new guide to locate missing patients at tuberculosis sanatoriums has been created. Researchers at the University of Winnipeg are set to launch a website to help families identify the location of missing relatives. Dr. Anne Lindsay spent years uncovering long-lost patient information from residential schools, hospitals, and government records. She patches together information from churches, residential schools, cemeteries, and various government institutions. She says the work is complex and should be more accessible to families.
The bewildering range of places relevant records may be housed makes it difficult and sometimes even impossible for families to find information about the deaths and burials of loved ones.
She says understanding the connection between residential schools and tuberculosis hospitals is often overlooked.
The connections between and through the webs of bureaucracy that formed around and as a result of federal Indigenous tuberculosis and healthcare policy not only impact the families of former Indian hospital and sanatoria patients, whether those patients arrived as adults or as school children, they also complicate ongoing research into the final resting places of residential school students.
A 2020 APTN investigation revealed thousands of Inuit patient letters were written in tuberculosis hospitals across the country. The letters offered insight into the stark conditions patients lived in, and various letters indicate patients were transferred from one sanatorium to the next, often crossing provincial borders.
Families of Indigenous tuberculosis patients often find themselves moving between a bewildering array of different systems and different privacy regimes without the kinds of resources and supports that non-Indigenous researchers and genealogists enjoy.
She says it makes the search for graves even more difficult. The guide will contain information between 1930 to 1970. Lindsay hopes this resource will make it easier for families to access and locate their missing relatives. Brittany Guillot, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
All right, we need to take a short break, but still to come, an interactive story map in Saskatchewan takes a look at Métis history. Welcome back to APTN National News. And now a story we brought you in November of last year to remember the 136th anniversary of the execution of Louis Riel. Dignitaries and politicians came together in Winnipeg to commemorate the life of the Métis leader. The laying of wreaths kicked off a day of honoring Métis leader Louis Riel. Dignitaries from the city, provincial, and federal governments, among others, were on hand to pay their respects for the founder of Manitoba, including newly elected Manitoba Premier Heather Stephenson.
Louis Riel was a passionate defender of the Métis people, advocating for land, language, and political rights for the Métis Nation. He also played a key role in creating the nation of Canada as we know it, and for that, all Canadians owe him a debt of gratitude. The contributions he made to the founding of our province are significant and must be acknowledged.
Riel was tried and subsequently hanged as a traitor by Canada at the Northwest Mounted Police Barracks in Regina. Along with leading his provisional government in the creation of the Manitoba Act, Riel also led the Red River Métis in two resistance movements, the Red River Resistance and the Northwest Resistance. Anita Campbell spoke on behalf of the Manitoba Métis Federation.
Today is about more than simply remembering Louis Riel and the selfish and heroic acts that he undertook for the greater good. This day is about carrying the legacy of Riel and the vision of the brave Métis who served with him on the provisional government and the Battle of Batoche.
Ontario's Minister of Indigenous Affairs Greg Rickford also released a statement on today's anniversary. It is a day to honor Riel's contributions to Canadian Confederation and to protecting the diverse history, culture, and identity of the Métis people. His courageous defense of minority and language rights helped lay the groundwork for a more inclusive Ontario and Canada. Once the event inside was over, people made their way to Riel's final resting place in the St. Boniface Cemetery. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg. Over in Saskatchewan that same day, there were also ceremonies to remember the contributions of Louis Riel. This past fall, the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan placed a traditional Métis sash on the statue of Riel ally Gabriel Dumont in downtown Saskatoon. A group of Métis youth also performed for the Métis community. The president of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan Youth Council says it's time to change the way Riel's story is told.
Newcomers to Canada when they're applying for citizenship in Canada and they're learning about the Métis people, it's still referred to as the rebellion, and that language is still there. And so figuring out how we can use this day and as momentum to continue that education and awareness growing forward.
Métis history in southeast Saskatchewan is now as close as your fingertips, with an interactive story map that walks people through time. Earlier this year, we brought you this story. The story map was launched on the Métis Nation's Eastern Region 3 website in January. It documents the stories of elders and knowledge keepers gathered over the last year. The Métis Nation's Marge Friesen says altogether the map offers a glimpse into the past.
You can click on a pin and it will bring you to another page where it's either the story of that family or photographs of a homestead, photographs of important archaeological sites in this area, and then it's all interlinked and connected.
We need to step aside for one final break, but still to come, Métis singer-songwriter Burke Joden just released a new video looking at the tragic Starlight Tours in Saskatoon. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Today we share an image of the Métis leader Louis Riel. He is officially recognized today as the founder of Manitoba and a political leader of the Métis people. Across Canada, today is more often known as Family Day. However, Manitoba and Riel are like bread and butter or ox and carts. For the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day, be sure to send us your pictures to share@aptn.ca. An Alberta man is using his unique line of hockey clothing to help Indigenous kids play hockey and combat racism on the ice. Smudge The Blades hockey clothing. Here is that story from the fall.
As someone who played junior level hockey, Heartland Kingfisher is no stranger to the struggles Indigenous youth face in the hockey community.
I know exactly how the struggles were, with hockey fees and hockey equipment and all that stuff.
Kingfisher created Smudge The Blades, a clothing company that brings Indigenous culture to the skating rink. His brand ships across Canada and has been worn by 9-year-old TikTok sensation Washie Janot from Barrier Lake, Quebec. Through scholarships, Smudge The Blades has helped pay for some families' hockey fees. Kingfisher says the feedback from parents has been overwhelming.
Very overwhelming with just seeing parents, like their kids couldn't play hockey this year if they didn't get the fees. And then just seeing on messaging, even phoning, I phoned a couple of them just to hear or see the weight lifted off their back. And then them just to say thank you so much.
Kingfisher is also using his platform to call out racism in hockey. On his Facebook page, he passed on stories of racism like Ethan Bears and a young man named Keegan from Swan River, Manitoba. Keegan is a 16-year-old high school hockey player, and last month he says he almost quit the sport after parents and spectators yelled racist slurs at him.
It didn't make me feel too well, and I just kind of kept it to myself and just texted my mom what happened. And
Keegan's father, Roger Brightnose, says the support from Smudge The Blades helps the larger issue of racism.
It was really nice of them to do that, and it created some exposure of how racism is really taking its effect in hockey for these young kids. So that was really good to create some awareness for his story, not only him but others as well. So.
Michelle Carlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Métis singer-songwriter Burke Joden just released a new video looking at the tragic Starlight Tours in Saskatoon. Joden says he imagined himself as a Starlight Tour victim. The tragic title refers to the practice of picking up Indigenous people and dropping them far from home, often with horrific results. In the early 2000s, 3 men froze to death, including Neil Stonechild, who was just 17 years old. He was in the custody of Saskatoon police at the time. Joden says he wanted to bring attention to the issue, which he says is ongoing.
So many people are, I don't know if the proper term is sheltered, or just got blinders on that in this beautiful country that evil can't happen, but it has happened. It does happen, and it'll continue to happen unless we do something about it. We talk about it.
Burke Joden's song Starlight Tour appears on an album released in 2020, along with a song about his grandfather's residential school experience. That song is called Indian Boy. And a Manitoba Métis beater is heading to Paris Fashion Week.
I freaked out. This has been a couple of weeks of just constant crying and smiling and just being excited. It all feels completely unreal.
Jessie Pruden started beading at the beginning of the pandemic. Her designs have caught the eyes and ears of many, leading to a full-time career as a beader and business owner of Bead and Butter. A couple of weeks ago, a New York-based retailer offered her a spot at Paris Fashion Week. Pruden, along with her brother Noel, will head to France at the end of the month. And that's, I'm sure, going to be a very exciting time for her. That's all we have for you tonight. For news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night.